I really believe that when anyone is doing anything well, particularly healing or helping work, but really pretty much anything, if we're doing it right, we're using our inner wisdom. I have these gifts, and we all have our own unique gifts, by the way. It's not, a special thing that I have or some, random person has. Like, we all have connection to our intuition. Just for some of us, it flows more freely and easily. But that you can change that. Your spirit knows, and your spirit knows no limit.
This is the Energy Within podcast, all about accessing, nurturing, and building your energy and confidence so that you can design your life the way you want. My name is Carrie Jokala. I am your host. I am a Reiki practitioner, a fitness instructor, a wife, a mom to 2 little boys, and this episode is a super fun interview with Victoria Shaw, who is an intuitive counselor and coach. I was so excited to finally be able to connect with Victoria today because we actually had to reschedule our initial meeting. I was having some recording issues. The particular week that we connected on, things were just not lining up well for me. So we rescheduled, and today things are much calmer, much easier, falling into place better. And we had just such an amazing conversation. We talked a lot about learning how to trust your intuition, connecting with your spirit guides, understanding past lives and the truth about karma, which you might be surprised to learn. I realized as she was talking, and I'm like, that's already my understanding. That's what's changed for me in the last few years as I've been slowly embarking on this journey. I won't spoil any of it. I'll let her describe later in the interview. But I really think you're going to get a lot from this episode, and I'd love to hear about it. So please feel free to share this episode, tag me, tag Victoria, let us know what you liked. Feel free to send me a message. Let me know if you have questions about anything or just to share some feedback. I'd love to hear how this resonates with you. So especially if you're someone who tends to question your intuition, or you'd like to learn how to connect better and really start trusting yourself so that you can get further along on this path, this episode is going to help you. I won't babble on for any longer. Let's get started. Victoria, I'm super excited to finally have you here and get to talk to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yay. Why don't you start and just describe who you are and what you do?
Oh, cool. Yeah. So I'm an intuitive counselor and coach, and my work combines my training in psychology and counseling with my intuitive gifts. And so, I have all the traditional counseling, and I have a background in research psychology. So I have a PhD in psychology. But the real special sauce that I bring to the table is the intuition. And I really believe that when anyone is doing anything well, particularly healing or helping work, but really pretty much anything, if we're doing it right, we're using our inner wisdom. And so for me, it was really about, as my intuition started to awaken and as I started to realize, I have this tool, I have these gifts, and we all have our own unique gifts, by the way. It's not, a special thing that I have or some, random person has. Like, we all have connection to our intuition. Just for some of us, it flows more freely and easily, but that you can change that.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as my intuition started to awaken and I started to tune into that, it just changed everything about my life. And so now pretty much everything I do is intuitively guided. I listen to my intuition first, and I use my mind, my brain, my training as that sort of file cabinet that my intuition can draw from. But most people do it the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Did you always kind of know that you had a strong intuition, or was it something that just kind of came over time?
So when I was a child, looking back, I can tell that I was highly intuitive. I'm an empath, meaning I felt what other people around me were feeling. I could sometimes hear people's thoughts. I could see energies and probably spirits as well around me. But I didn't know that that's what was going on. I didn't have the language for it. My mom is an empath, and I think that maybe there was some language around that. And she certainly had some language around energy, but in her own special, unique way that wasn't always super helpful, to be dead honest, not to throw mom under the bus. But I really didn't have that spiritual perspective. I didn't really have a way of understanding it. And I think a lot of kids are like that. As a child, most people all of us actually come into the world with these intuitive gifts, because your intuition comes from your soul, from your spirit, from your higher self. And we were born connected to that. And then over the process of life, and usually it happens pretty early, we start to shut down that connection. And so for me, the connection didn't really so much shut down. It was always pretty active, but I didn't always know I was using it or how to use it. And sometimes I was overwhelmed by it. So it was kind of using me. And so it wasn't until my 40s that, or mid 30s, I would say, after I had my children and I started to pursue, I had a pediatrician that was a little bit out of the box, and I started to pursue different healing modalities for my kids, that I started to be introduced to this world of alternative healers and intuitives and psychics and astrologers and all this crazy stuff that hadn't really been on my radar so much before. And I just kept getting this message that that I was very intuitive and I needed to awaken my intuition. And as soon as I listened, and it took a few years, that's when everything shifted and changed. And I started to get control of this gift that I'd had all along, but I didn't know how to work with it.
I love that story and that growth there. And I think it could give some people hope to know that you didn't always recognize these gifts, that you weren't always, using them or knowingly using them, and that you were, late 30s, early 40s when you finally awoke to it. And yes. A lot of people, I think, so young, we start worrying about like, oh, well, I've missed the boat. Like people in their 20s are already worried that they're too late for stuff. And it's like, no, you still have time.
Yes,
you're still
absolutely.
here.
Every moment is a moment to reinvent yourself. And it's really funny because I was on that you bring this up, because I was on a little networking call this morning. And I think there was a question that was being asked about if you had a business fairy godmother. And I believe I do. I believe we all have a spiritual support team. And I was like, I do. I have a bunch of business fairy godmothers and I talk to them all the time. But regardless, that was the question posed. And somebody said for their answer, while I wish that you had, connected with me sooner, because I got this master's degree in my 40s and now it's too late for me to do anything with it. And it was not an interactive call, so I didn't say anything, but my brain went, I got my second master's in my 40s and I feel like I'm doing really well. The last, 10, 11 years of my life have been, I really feel like I'm in the zone and my practice has grown exponentially. And so, I think we do sometimes have that conditioning that, I'm too old to change, but I don't know. I did. It was pretty seamless. And I continue to grow and change. I'm in the process of moving cross country now. When you follow your intuition, you're not so much constrained by all of the shoulds and the don'ts and the rules of the human mind, which is mostly fear-based. And you just start to align with your spirit, and your spirit knows, and your spirit knows no limit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And she or he will guide you.
So you mentioned the fairy godmother, which made me think spirit guides. And yes, I know that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. So can we start with, for anyone who might not know or understand, what or who is a spirit guide?
Yes, I love that question. And I will say I've been in practice now for about 11 years. And when I first started teaching, because I do a lot of teaching other people to connect with their intuition. And when I first started teaching, spirit guides would always be that place that I would kind of get, like, all right, now we're going into the real woo. Because intuition, you can kind of explain left-brained if you have to. Yeah. It's not as fun, but you can do it. But spirit guides, at that point, you're like, okay, freak flag is flying now. But for me, that connection to my spirit guides, oh my God, what a game changer. Because the idea of our spiritual support team is knowing that when we undertake this human journey, so we're spirits, having a human experience, we forget our spiritual origins. We forget everything that our soul knows, or a lot of things that our soul knows. It filters through, but we don't always see it clearly. But our spirit guides don't. So they're your team on the other side that, is rooting you on, guiding you, and helping make up for what you've forgotten, because they're remembering it for you and holding that space. And spirit guides can be everything from deceased loved ones, or sometimes our ancestors, or sometimes energy that really perfected a certain skill or something in their own human lifetimes. And then they're hanging around Earth trying to help others, from the other side do the same. But we all also have specific guides that are assigned to us from birth to death. And those are the ones that are really, really, really in the mix about you and your specific life path and supporting you from that. And they can change over time, but you usually have at least one that doesn't change.
Okay. So how does one start to connect with these spirit guides?
Well, the first thing to do is to know that they're there and to honor that. And sometimes we block that connection too, right? Because our human mind has this idea about what's good and what's bad in our lives. And so most humans have been at a point, at least some point, when they're like, life sucks. This is overwhelming. This is wrong. And, you blame God or spirit or whatever. And you're like, why are you doing this to me?
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing that's just coming through to share is that your spirit guides are always working for you. And that life is always working for you or with you, even when it doesn't feel that way. And so one of the ways to crack open that little window to connect with, your soul, but also your spiritual support team, is to recognize, even when it doesn't feel like it, life is on your side. And when you do that, and again, it can, for some of us, that's real easy. For a lot of us, it's the crack opens and it slams shut, and it opens and it slams shut. It's okay. It's just faith. But the more that you can fall into this idea that I am supported and life is happening for me, even when it feels like it's all going against me, that's when you can start to really lean in and feel their support. It's there all the time. But when it's a matter of allowing it and opening yourself up to it and having faith that it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of the first step. And I remember a really long time ago when I was first doing this work, and one of the guides that came to me a lot, and guides can be very idiosyncratic, specific to you. My main guide is someone that I know I've known in a past life or series of past lives, and very specific. But one of the guides that I worked with early on was Mother Mary. And it's kind of funny because my background, if I have a religious background at all, it is not Christian. I was Jewish, so wasn't raised in a very spiritual family anyway. But that was one of my primary guides, and I worked with a lot when I was starting out. And I remember having an experience when I was doing some healing work and meditation, where she was showing me all these past lifetimes of really crappy stuff going on. I'm in a jail cell and being tortured,
Geez.
Crazy stuff. I know, because we all have that part of our collective human experience. And she was showing me that and I was praying to her and crying to her, why aren't you here? And she showed me that she was there in every lifetime.
Oh, wow.
And it was such a profound experience, because I was like, oh. And so sometimes we block our guides because we are feeling so overwhelmed by our humanity that we just can't see them, even though they're there.
Mm-hmm. Which leads me to my next question that I kind of want to ask. So I always hear they're there. We just need to ask for help. We need to invite them in to help.
Yes.
But then you also say that they're always working for us. So can you help connect those two? How much do we need to ask for outside of what they're already doing?
I love that question so much. I think like everything else, our human mind wants to micromanage everything.
Yeah.
Because that's just how we've been taught, right? We've been taught that the person that does is your small self, your small personality, whereas really the person, it's not a person. What you really want to do is sort of align with your broader wisdom, even if you don't always know exactly what that is, and then let that work through you. I don't know if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say it's the same thing with spirit guides. It's a cooperation, it's an allowing, and then you take inspired action. So you start to learn to listen to the whispers of your soul, and you start to flow with that. And you can always ask for stuff. Always ask for stuff, because you never know. Just don't limit yourself by feeling like you have to micromanage them, because they have the bigger blueprint. However, the guides are reminding me to share, you always have free will. So if you
Right.
want something, or you have a question, or you're not sure about something, send it out there, because they want to help you on your human journey. They want to support you, and you are the one who's going to be taking action.
Mm-hmm.
I always get this metaphor, like if you've ever done those team building exercises where you have a blindfold and you have to do this obstacle course, and then the other people on your team are like guiding you through it.
Yeah.
Okay. Life is kind of like that, right? We come into human form, we put on the blindfold. Before we came into our bodies, we set up the obstacle course, by the way. We sit down with our guides and we make some plans. This is the truth, even though it doesn't always feel that way. But then you forgot what you planned and why you planned it. And you have the blindfold on, and you have to get through this obstacle course without, landing on your face too many times. And so your guides can sit at the sidelines. They can, tell you where to go. They can, warn you when you're about to crash or face plant. But the thing that they can't do is carry you.
Mm.
Right. So you have to take that action. And so that's sort of the difference, right? So you can ask for things, but you really want to sort of listen to them and then take inspired action. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good deal.
Yeah. And that kind of makes me wonder a little bit about, I shouldn't say wonder. I think it just kind of makes me think about when people say, everything happens for a reason, or that idea that we've manifested or invited in whatever's happening to us, good or bad. And then some people are very against that. It's like, well, why would I have asked for that? Why would I want this in my life? But it's like, well, I mean, I see from the human side, like, yeah, of course you wouldn't want that. But when you're looking bigger picture and you're going all the way back, absolutely you chose that. And there was a reason for it. It wasn't, like.
Yes. And there's different levels on which we choose as well, right? So on the highest sense, right, before you're born, it's my understanding, and then I've seen this, with my special eyeballs, we sit down with our spirit guides and our higher self, and we plan the lifetime. And we plan, specific, not everything, because we have free will, but the basics, who you're going to hang out with, who you're going to be born to, maybe where you're going to live, some aspects of your personality, maybe like what you're going to look like. And oftentimes too, some of the major touchstone moments and struggles or challenges or not challenges, we also plan in, things to make life easier for us, and skills and people to support us. So it's all there. And then again, you put the blindfold on and you go, figure it out. So there's choice on that level, on the soul level. But then once you're in your human body with that blindfold on, bumping into stuff, right? You sometimes create some karma. You create some things in your life that, don't feel so grand. And some of our higher selves sometimes puts challenges in our way too. But that's another level of choosing, right? So we choose from our confusion, and we also choose from our highest awareness. And we're always doing both at the same time. And the trick is to choose as little as possible from the level of confusion. But even more than that, everything that you choose from that level of confusion actually is still working for you, because that's how life works. Right. And so we sometimes try to micromanage it and say, well, I don't want to choose this, and I don't want to choose that. And our head spins about how we can get everything the way we want it. But again, that's your smaller mind, when really what we want to do is align with our wiser mind, and then, be the conduit for expressing, our deepest wisdom in our human container, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And so, And so that's kind of how it works. And so what I say to those people that say I didn't choose it, I'll say your human self didn't choose it. And I would never talk over someone's experience too, because when we are really, really in pain, and remember, part of my background is as a counselor, right? I certainly don't, if someone walks into my office with a tragedy, I don't go, well, you chose this, deal with it. Because, life it can be really uncomfortable, and that might be an understatement for some people listening. Uncomfortable, Victoria, like it sucks. So you have to honor your humanness and honor your human experience. And there's a part of you that doesn't know that you chose, or chose, out of confusion in a way that you're like, what? But I also will help people see the layers in which they choose. Yeah. Right. Because sometimes we get into patterns when we are unconscious, and it's not conscious. We're unconsciously making choices all the time and experiencing things in our lives that we're like, I don't want to experience this, but it's just it's serving us on some level and we've gotten used to it. And so as we shine the light of consciousness on these unconscious patterns, that's another way to shift them, but not from the perspective of micromanaging life, which is where a lot of people get stuck, but from the perspective of just learning to flow more truly and deeply with your highest and truest self.
I've noticed that I tend to go back and forth a little bit as I've just kind of somewhat recently started the journey that I'm on. And what I have noticed, though, is when I feel the most in alignment in those moments and I know that I'm on my right path and I stop worrying so much about everything, I just feel so much more at peace. No matter what else is going on around me. Like, I'm not worried. I'm not living in fear. And then, of course, there'll be things that take me out of that. And then I'm back into that, quick reaction, heightened emotions. And and then those other thoughts start coming in again.
So the peaceful state is who and what you really are. That's when you're aligned. Enjoy it, because that's how life can be all the time.
Yeah.
The other part, don't judge it. Don't blame it. That's your humanness. And hello, we all got it. And so the trick is that when you find yourself in that state, just be kind and just remember there's more. And you'll usually, regroup pretty quickly. I see you're regrouping quicker and quicker with each shot.
Yeah.
And it's the awareness that counts. Right? When you're looping in your mind, it's the moment that you become aware and, go, oh, look what's happening right now. So you're back in your true self, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but a lot of times we get lost or we do something else. We're like, and I know, because this happens to me too. I'm so angry right now. I don't like being angry. I shouldn't be angry, but I'm angry. Like, sit with it, love it, be aware, like be the observer of your own life. And that's how things shift.
Yeah. What I really am getting more and more tired of is anytime I run into people preaching these ideas that we need to deny our humanness or, separate ourselves from it if we want to ascend or reach higher levels, and in whatever aspect of what we're talking about, whether it's a spiritual or religious or whatever, just any of that. I'm like, no, like, if we're here, this is a beautiful thing. We chose this. We're here for a reason. So denying it is just going to keep everything separate and keep us, like you were saying, kind of in that fear-based and small-minded living. And then it's just going to make things harder when we don't allow everything to integrate and be one beautiful part of the whole thing.
Yes, I love how you said that. That is so lovely. When I first started doing this work, the message that I would get again and again is, Victoria, and this is true of everyone, not just me, but Victoria, your job is to be that conduit, that balance between heaven and earth. And I was someone who experienced her spirituality. And I didn't even know that's what I was doing by flying out the top of my head. And you're a Reiki person, so you know about chakras, right? Flying out through the seventh chakra, hanging out there, and then, rarely coming home. And so what I really needed to do is learn to rest in my body. And, learning to be grounded and present and feeling safe being here, and also bringing that higher level of awareness to the places that didn't feel safe being here. So I could partner with them, so I could love them, so I could honor them, so that I could accept them, so that I could support them.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a whole nother way of living, because your soul chose to be here on earth right now in the particular container that you are inhabiting. This is a choice that you made, and it's a beautiful choice. And it's my understanding that souls, that choose this human journey are so honored. There are many journeys you can choose, and this one is an especially powerful one. And it's like, the guides look down on us and go, oh my God, you guys, you're rock stars to do this, right? Not in a bad way, but it's like, it's an honor. It's a privilege. I know life doesn't always feel that way, and it doesn't have to, but it is. And so, it's about being here, and it's about having a human journey, because otherwise you wouldn't be here if you hadn't signed up for a human journey. And your humanness is beautiful. That's why you're here. It's just that many people get lost in their humanness. And so a lot of spiritual teachings are really about whacking people over the head and say, wake up, wake up. But people that are a little ahead on the journey have a different perspective, because they're starting to wake up and they're thinking like, oh, I need to leave my humanness behind. No, it's about that divine integration.
Right. Yeah. I want to take a little step back, because there was one more question I wanted to ask you about the spirit guides. So my spirit guides that I am aware of, I only knew that they were there and was able to start tapping into them because they stepped forward for somebody else who was doing Reiki for me. And she was like, I never have seen anybody else's spirit guide step forward, but yours were like I have one that's a fairy, and I guess she was adamant. She's like, no, I need to be here. Like, okay. And actually, some other things that had happened prior to that started to connect together, and it made sense. I'm like, okay, I was on the path to connecting with her and really, understanding who she was. But I don't know. I'm sure I would have. I don't want to say I don't know that I would have ever, but I feel like it would have taken me a lot longer to recognize what or who my spirit guides were without her help. So I guess what I'm leading to is, how do we trust enough to start picking up on who our spirit guides are?
Great questions. And I will say a couple things. Number one, it is not uncommon to hear your guidance better out of someone else's mouth, especially, if it's something complicated or something that you're not used to doing, because, that's why I'm in business, right? Because when we're close to our own stuff, the noise in our head can kind of overtake our intuition. It's normal. I sometimes hear my own guidance for myself. I often hear my own guidance for myself. Sometimes I hear my own guidance out of someone else's mouth. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And it awakens something in me. So the world is, everything's connected, right? So if it comes into your head, or it comes out of someone else's mouth, or you read it in a book, or you see it on a billboard, and it awakens something in you, that's your intuition. That is your spirit speaking to you. That's number one. And it doesn't really matter where it's coming from. It matters that you recognize it within you and you run with it.
Okay.
That's number one. And then in terms of trusting, we all have guidance. And I just say it's sort of about surrendering and just opening up that conduit, and then learning to trust what comes through, and practice and play, and don't get so serious. So for me, one of the things that I started to do was automatic writing. And I would communicate with my guides back and forth, and it would be like a little dialogue. Was I making some of it up? Probably, but at first at least, but the boundary between imagination and intuition, it's almost the same thing. So I wouldn't worry about that so much. I tell people, you kind of flow into it, you kind of learn, and eventually you'll start to see stuff come through that that you couldn't have made up yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you follow. And then eventually you just get comfortable. I know what certain guides feel like. I know what they sound like. Am I 100%? Probably not. I'm human. Am I, does it come clear enough that I can work with it? And it guides me pretty clearly most of the time? Yes. And, but it takes practice, and it takes allowing, and it's totally fine to hear your guides through someone else's mouth. And it's important too, and I tell this to every client that comes to me on the first session, my job is to give your guidance back to you. So I'm the conduit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not, sometimes I know stuff that people don't know because I have a lot of advanced degrees, and I'll tell you if it's the stuff I know. But most of the time it's just, I'm the conduit for your guidance. And if it comes out of my mouth because you already know it, or your spirit knows it and you're ready to hear it. And then it's your job as the client to see what awakens, what resonates, what feels right to you. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's immediate. And other times, 6 months later, someone's driving in their car and they're like, Victoria said this thing in her session, and now I understand.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not me. I love what I do, and I love being the conduit to help other people connect with their inner wisdom. But it's I'm not the guru. You're the guru.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say that as you've been talking, it's just been reminding me about, again, on my own personal journey so far, that, in the beginning, how you mentioned imagination and intuition can be so connected. Because in the beginning, you're wondering like, okay, did I make that up? That's just my imagination, right? But then you start to get that feedback and that confirmation. For me, when I was practicing Reiki with other people, or just doing Reiki for someone else, and then they see, hear, feel the exact same thing, or something so similar that like you can't ignore, like, okay, that was real, that happened. I didn't just make that up, that actually happened,
Absolutely. And you get to a critical point where you have so many of these experiences that you're just like, okay, I get it. It's got to be this way. It can't be that
Yeah.
way. But something that the guides want me to share, it's very interesting. And I don't think it's relevant to you, but it must be relevant to your listeners. It's so cool. What they're saying is sometimes what happens is because you're so used to leading with your mind that, you think about how things should be, or you're creating with the mind and you're telling yourself stories and you're not listening and deeply flowing into it. You're just creating more mind-based material. So let's say, I'm going to try to use an example. If you're doing Reiki, right? You may feel like, because I want to get this from the guides because it's so cool. Intuition is about being in the space. And you know what I mean. It's about being in that space of not knowing. You have to step into that space to hear your intuition. If you immediately move in with your mind to fill the gap, you'll close it down. Okay. Yeah. So you are able to be in the gap, in the space. I see it. When you work with people, you flow into it, you listen, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Right? What sometimes happens if we're not comfortable in that space, or we think there's a certain way we were supposed to do it, which, by the way, we've all been taught if you've been in school, and most of us were in school for a long time. I was in school for an extra long time, so I know how it works. Right? There's this expectation of always needing to say something, know something, give the teacher back what they want to hear. See, none of this is relevant when it comes to our intuition. Intuition is surprising. There's not one right answer. 5 different people could read the same person and get a completely different answer because we all have our unique perspective and our unique gifts that we want to, use to support others. And so sometimes what happens is people just, they make it up from a place of insecurity, or they make it up from a place of needing to know. And that's where we get kind of lost or kind of stuck. Yeah. But when you can just, make it up from that place of inspiration, from that place of, I'm going to get out of the way, and I'm going to allow that imagination tool of mine to co-create with my highest self or my guides, or however you want to put it. That's where the magic happens. Yeah. And you do that pretty naturally.
I've been learning too. It's been helping on the journey that I've been on to trust my intuition, and learning, like when people say, trust your gut, and whatever pops into your head first. Yes. That's your intuition, and that's what's right. And this last year I've been learning that, because that's all of the stuff where I've gotten the confirmation, like, okay, did I make that up? And then you find out, like, nope, she saw that too. So, and it's always the first thing.
And have a beginner's mind, right? I still have a beginner's mind, and I've been doing this for a while now, where I'm getting this image of you at 7 years old and blah, 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 blah. And, most of the time it lands. Sometimes it doesn't. It's okay, right? It's just about kind of feeling into it and allowing it to go through. And again, you'll know because you'll get those validations. And each time you get that validation, it strengthens the connection. Yeah. And we learn too, I think, sometimes even more profoundly from those moments that we had a gut feeling, right? Or we had an intuition and we didn't listen and it turned out to be right, because those are the ones you tend to really remember. Right. So if you've had those experiences, friends, rather than, taking the mallet and whacking yourself over the head, go, no, this is the best validation I could have had that my intuition was working. And now I can trust it even more moving forward.
Absolutely. I wanted to mention too, I made a little note for myself, because as you were talking a little bit ago, you mentioned automatic writing. I think that might have been a message for me, because that keeps coming up. Yeah. I think I'm supposed to start doing that, and I haven't yet. So I wrote it down, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah. It's a great conduit. And you basically just, the way that I do it, it's different for everyone, but the way that I like to do it is now I can sort of sit down and start writing, because I've been doing it a while and I have an agreement with my guides that this is how it's going to work. But oftentimes what I recommend is just write down everything that comes through, everything that you think, even if it's like, I don't know what I'm writing. I don't know what to do. I don't hear anything right now. Why don't I hear anything right now? And it will start to flow. That's what helps it flow for me. But some people can also just sit down. One of my teachers who started off with automatic writing as her main way of doing this said, she would get all this stuff and then she would ask her guides, like, well, how do I know it's real? And so they showed her by having her sit down for about 10 days solid where nothing came through. And it was like on the 10th day when she was like, oh, wait, nothing is coming through. Other times stuff does come through. That's how I know it's real, okay. Right? Yeah. If that makes sense, right? And so you can sit in the space too and wait for it. But most of us are not that patient.
Well, I know it. I think about, it's been quite a while since I've done this, but I used to, and I actually think I still have it. I have plenty of pages left. I had a prayer journal. And
Love it.
every day I would just start journaling whatever was on my mind, whatever I would try to start out with what I was grateful for, and then I would launch into what was pissing me off.
Love it. Okay.
But I know that there were multiple times where I'd be whining or complaining about something or asking something, and I knew that what I was writing in response to it was not coming from me. I was like,
right.
Oh, there's my answer. Okay, thank you.
Exactly. And sometimes it feels different, or sometimes you just look back and you're like, whoa, what was that? And your soul recognizes your soul.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like you recognize it. And the more you practice, you just recognize it even more. And it's just when we're trying to force or fix, or we have an idea of how it's supposed to be, that's when we block it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have that space to kind of surrender to it and flow into it, it'll work every time.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit about past lives, because you had mentioned that as well, some things that were going on for you. So I guess I don't even know where to start with that. So why don't I just let you take the lead?
Sure. So it's my understanding, like I said before, that we're all spiritual beings having a human experience, only we don't tend to do it just once. We tend to have multiple human experiences so that we can learn from different eyeballs and different perspectives. And what happens is, as you experience different lessons from different perspectives, different bodies, different times, places, right? You start to get a whole picture of life, of yourself. And it's my understanding, and this is probably oversimplified, but it's my understanding that the journey of life is about rediscovering in your own inner divinity while in human form. And so sometimes, we get it right in one try, but oftentimes it takes a lot of different eyeballs and a lot of different perspectives to find our way home while in human form. And so that's basically what this reincarnation thing is all about. And most people that come to me have already been around the block a few times.
Okay.
I do have some clients that come to me that are rather new to the human experience, but have had a lot of lifetimes in other realms. Because like I said, Earth is just one of the schools and places that we get to play.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is play for your soul, even if it doesn't feel like it to your human self. And there's no time. So it's really happening all at once. But since we have time as part of our understanding of, in this human world of our linear minds, we can understand it from a timeline. But in the highest sense, it's all happening all at once, which is also really cool, because when we heal something in this life, right, when we correct karma, and I can talk to you in a minute about how I understand karma, because it's different than how a lot of people understand it. But when we do the work in our present body, it actually affects all of the other human experiences that we have had in the quote unquote past. So it's pretty cool. And I see it like this web of interconnectedness, and I will watch as that web shifts and changes as people, hit a higher level of awareness in their current body.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that was too abstract.
No, that was making sense to me.
Right. And, I think the places that people get stuck with this idea of reincarnation is, first of all, if you're having a hard time in this body, right, you don't really want to think that you're going to have to ever do this again. So don't worry about it. If you're in that place, just focus on what's happening now. You got enough on your plate there. Reincarnation for me gave me a lot of peace, and it helped me not sort of overcommit to the self I'm experiencing now. But it's important. You're here now in this form, in this perspective. If this is the eyeballs that you're looking through, and the eardrums that I'm talking to, these are the ones that mostly count for you now. And so understanding reincarnation is not an invitation to go time traveling. Your primary commitment is to your present experience. Okay. And I think the other place that people get stuck to is they go on these little past life journeys where they, you hear about, oh, in a past lifetime, I did this or this happened to me, and they make it part of their sense of self and their false sense of self, or their human sense of self. And again, you got enough to deal with in this life. So, sometimes these past life experiences can help us understand what's going on now. They can help us understand what we're working on now, what our purpose is now, what the lesson is now. And I'm a big fan. Sometimes too, something from another body gets activated when you're in this one. And so just like trauma, I'm a therapist, right? So I'll tell you, trauma is the gift that keeps on giving. And if you've had, early trauma, and then something else later in your lifetime activates it, it can feel that thing that the thing that activates it or triggers it, will feel worse if it's also compounded with stuff that happened before. And so it can be the same thing with past life things. Sometimes you'll have, what's called a past life overlay, where something in this life triggers an even bigger memory in a past life. And that's why you kind of are over responding to what's happening now.
Okay.
And so being aware of that can help, take the volume down and release. And it also can help you as you look through the eyeballs that you're looking through now and deal with whatever's going on in the present. It can also help you tune into and more efficaciously. I don't know if that's a word, but that's the one that my guides are giving me, work with that past life energy too. But the trick is to remember that the present moment is the most important one, that you are not your past life selves. You're not even really this present life self. This is just the container that you're wearing right now. You're more than that. You want to honor it, but you don't want to get lost in it.
Okay. So you're saying use it to help you understand what's going on, but don't take it on as an identity.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay.
And everything is, and the present moment is the most important one. So you always want to use everything, in service of what's happening now.
Okay.
And even from a therapy perspective, right? I have a sign in my office, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I'm not. It came into my brain. And it says, don't let yesterday take up too much of today. And I always have that there because it's a therapeutic training, and the way my intuitive gifts work as well, I'll often be shown early life traumas that are weighing on the things that we're working on in the present, because that's sort of how life works. Usually early on, things get all shaken up and they create your personality, your false sense of self, all of your illusions and delusions about the world. And then you get a chance to undo them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll often be shown that. But what can sometimes happen in therapy, and it can sometimes happen if you want to do past life work too, it's the same thing, is we get stuck and we're like, yes, I'm that child that never got the love and care I wanted from my parents, and that's just who I'm going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Right. And so the most important moment is now. And as long as you're operating mostly from there, you're good.
Okay. I like that.
Does that
Good.
make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to hear about this karma idea.
Yes, ma'am. So a lot of people think of karma as punishment, right? And they think of this idea that, whatever is happening to me in my life now, I judge it good, I judge it bad. It's because of something that I did that was good or bad in a past life. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing to know is on the spiritual level, there's no good or bad because there's no judgment, right? That's a very human idea. Now, there are things that are more aligned with our highest, truest nature and things that are really, 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 really more confused. So that would be like, good is more aligned, bad is more confused, but your spirit doesn't really look at it that way. Okay. And there's no judgment. So whether, you're a serial killer in one life or, Mother Mary or Mother Teresa rather, or, whatever, like your spirit, you're going to be held responsible for the choices that you made, but there's no judgment. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing to do with karma is uncouple this idea of judgment because it ain't there. But karma is more a matter, the way that I look at it is more a matter of experience and perspective and consequence.
Yeah.
And so every action has a consequence. And so certain actions will have the consequence, of a different action, either in this lifetime or another lifetime. And usually it's about perspective and experience. So, if you do something, quote unquote, to somebody else in a lifetime, like say you cheat them or swindle them because you really believe that in that lifetime from, your understanding and confusion that it was yours coming and, they had more than you and it was totally fine for you to steal because, that's how life works. To correct that in another lifetime, you might experience the others. What is it like to have someone swindle you? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's balancing. And it's just about taking on different perspectives. And after a while, an older soul sort of learns that some actions aren't really worth the consequence.
Right.
And so we just more naturally are like, yeah, I'm not going there. But it's all about learning, and there's always perfect synchronicity too. So, whatever experience you're having in the now, is meant to be. It's just meant to be. It's just how it's supposed to be. And the question is, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to move forward? And how are you going to, allow that to be part of your learning and growth?
Yeah. I love that you described all of that because that's actually I first learned that a few years ago when I started reading the Conversations with God series. I don't know if you've read that at all, but
I haven't. I probably should.
that was the first thing that opened my eyes to that. And honestly, as I was reading the first book, definitely, it made so much sense to me, like the way that we're raised being taught about God and, punishment and all this kind of stuff, things that never really made sense to me. But I was like, okay, this is what they say it is, so I guess that's how it is. But it still never made sense. I read that book, and that was one of the concepts in it, that there are no consequences. Like we like to think, or not consequences, no judgment.
Yeah.
And that, we like to think, oh, there's a special place in hell for these people. And I love to think that. I would still love to think that about certain types of people. But from that higher, that soul perspective, and even from thinking about God, and it's something else I read. I think I was reading the fourth book. I'm in the fourth book right now. And God was saying, well, do you want a judgmental, vengeful God, or do you want an unconditionally loving God? Which one do you want?
Right.
I'm like, well, I believe more in the unconditionally loving God. And that aligns more with that idea. Like, okay, yeah, you were a serial killer, but you reconnect at the end and you're loved again. You're loved the whole time. I'm saying this wrong, but you know what I mean.
Like every human being is loved the whole time.
Right.
And of course it's normal for our human self that might be hurting to sometimes want vengeance or, want the pain that we feel to be inflicted on the other person. And to some extent, if they have it coming, if that will serve them, then that may very well be, but it doesn't really even serve us to have those thoughts, but it's okay if you do. But what, our higher selves recognize is that there's a lot of confusion here on earth. And so when we misstep or we do things that are not aligned, it's just that we've fallen deeper into that illusion.
Yeah.
And we all have varying degrees of awareness and understanding, and it depends where we are in our journey and how we set up, the obstacle course. There's a lot of things. And the other thing that really wants to come through for people too around karma is just because something quote unquote bad happens to you in your life does not mean that, you did something bad in the past, because we often sometimes do choose these little struggles and challenges because there's many different ways in which we want to learn on earth. Yeah. But oftentimes up until now, we learn through struggle and challenge.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that way. So you don't have to, double down on this whole challenge suffering thing, because I believe we're moving into a new place for many of us where suffering will be much more optional. But that's often how we've chosen to learn up until now on earth. And so sometimes you have a challenge or something that your soul planned, and it's not a consequence at all. It's just, you're like, what's the fastest way for me to get this lesson?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's lots of different reasons why things happen on earth, just so you know.
Yeah. And I want to touch on too, because where I started to feel a little bit down on it, the author of the Conversations with God book, when he was talking with God, you see in the conversation that he's like, okay, well, so people are just allowed to run around and do whatever they want and kill people and do this and do that awful thing. It's like, well, no, like you said, we need to address there's still consequences. So God was saying, absolutely have your values and your morals and the things that you live by and that you believe are right, but just understand that there are still consequences, good or bad, positive or negative, however you want to label them, but there are still consequences for your actions. Just because there's no judgment doesn't mean there won't be consequences.
Absolutely. And I think what's happening for a lot of humans on the planet right now, especially the ones that are older souls or awake, or however you want to put it, just, have that broader awareness, is we're starting to recognize, and this is what we're all being nudged to do. We are all being nudged to do, by the way, is starting to, listen to the God of your own heart and start to tune into your own moral compass, because human beings have a lot of ideas of what's right and wrong, good and bad, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And, some of those are aligned with what your spirit would say anyway. I think thou shalt not kill in most cases is a good plan.
Right.
But again, when you learn to listen to your own inner compass, that's when magical things happen. And again, a lot of us have this conditioning that says, if I listen to that, I'm going to go completely awry. But not really. When you're really listening to, the God of your own heart, you can't go wrong.
Right.
And so part of this human journey is learning to listen to that and learn to discount all of those shoulds and teachings and things that are ultimately fear-based, but have come to smack us in the face and say, oh, this is morality. You have to do this. And oftentimes, when something doesn't feel right to you, lean into that, feel into that. It might not be right for you. Even if everyone else on the planet thinks it is, your soul, your higher self, your inner wisdom always knows best.
Yes, I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah. And if you happen to get confused between your ego and your higher wisdom, that's okay too, because you'll get more chances.
Right. It's never too late. It's never too late.
Every moment is a new moment to awaken and recreate.
Yeah. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. I have loved every moment of this, and I think you've helped explain quite a lot of things. So thank you for that.
Thank you. It was really fun. And I have to say, it's really a testament to you. I do a lot of these shows and, I always just tune into the guidance and what wants to come through. But boy, the stuff that wanted to come through for you was pretty high level. And I think it's just a testament to you, to your audience, to what, you're ready to hear and receive, and what your guides also want to share.
Thank you.
So, yeah. And I mean that.
Well, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you and how they can connect with you?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that. So I do lots of different things. I do individual readings and coaching and intuitive counseling to people all over the planet Earth, remotely and through video and phone. And you can find out more about that on my website, victoriashawintuitive.com. I do everything from, regular meetings to one-of, so lots of cool options there. I have a couple online classes as well. I have an Activate Your Intuition class, which is a self-paced class on how to connect with your spirit guides and just, learn to lean into that intuitive sense. And I do group coaching and group classes a lot too. I'm going to have one coming up probably shortly after this airs for intuitive empaths. So people that feel what other people are feeling and might sometimes get confused and lost in that, and how we can leverage the power of that amazing gift. And that will be coming up soon. I also have a podcast myself, Intuitive Connection, where I do a lot of just channeled messages for my listeners. So we talk about things like intuition and spirituality and reincarnation, pretty much whatever the guides want to share. And I have amazing guests and do intuitive readings on the show as well. So that's a fun place to find me. I'm on Instagram at Victoria Shaw. Yes, at Victoria Shaw Intuitive. And then my current favorite place to play is on Facebook. I have a Facebook group, Intuitive Connection Community, and I do a lot of free teachings. Again, I'm going to have an empaths class coming up first on there, which will be completely free. And I do weekly readings, group readings, and I bring on all the guests from my show as well. So it's lots of fun to play there. And I think that covers all the fun things that I do.
Awesome. Yay. Well, thank you again so much, Victoria. This has been awesome.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
All right. Was that cool or was that cool? That was cool. So as Victoria was talking, a lot of that, I don't want to say a lot of that, everything was making a lot of sense to me. So I hope that it made sense to you as well. I figured if it was making sense to me, it was going to make sense to you. And I really hope that this provided you with a lot of guidance to understand who you really are and what's available to you. I really, really, if you're not already, I really want you to start to learn how to trust your intuition. And I speak from experience that trusting your intuition just makes life so much better. And it might not happen overnight, but as long as you continue to trust yourself, you continue on that path, you continue on that journey, all of this is going to open up to you. No one who calls themselves an intuitive is any different than you, in that sense that we all, like Victoria said right in the beginning, we all have these gifts. We all can have access to this. We're meant to have access to our intuition, to our higher self, to our spirit connections, however you want to describe them. I believe it's the same across the board. So it really, people want to put emphasis on names or how you describe things. And I really, in the end, I don't think it matters. What matters is the connection. and you can start fostering that connection by starting to trust yourself. So I encourage you to connect with Victoria, jump into her group, hop into that empath class. I know there's a lot of you out there. Check out her podcast, and don't be afraid to reach out to her for that one-on-one guidance, readings, group coaching, whatever sounds like it is right for you. As always, I would like to invite you to a couple of things. First of all, if you're not already in my group, The Energy Within, please hop in there. That's where we do group Reiki sessions as often as I'm able to, live card pulls, and there's going to be, if there's not already by the time I release this, there will be more focus on some fitness aspects. So we get all aspects of your energy covered, and we're going to talk about it in that group as well. So that's your free access. If you want that more one-on-one guidance, please jump in and sign up for a one-on-one virtual Reiki session. By the time this airs, I will be partway through my Reiki master level training, which means that I most likely won't be offering mini sessions anymore. They will be full sessions, and the cost will go up. I would love to see you in there. If you have any questions about any of this, please let me know. The same for Victoria. Please reach out to her if you have any questions for her. If you loved this episode, and I sincerely hope that you did, please share it. Go ahead and share a screenshot, a screen flow, share some audio to your Instagram or your Facebook. Tag me, tag Victoria. Let us know what you liked. Let me know what was helpful, and let me know what you need more of on this podcast. Thank you so much, as always, for listening, and I will see you next time.